Happy holidays, everybody. My name is Onepeg, and this is the news. So today we had a devblog that was put on by Battlestate Games that you can see whenever you like, but for the purpose of this, it was a 3-hour podcast that I figured I would shrink down into about 15 minutes. Hopefully, you guys can bear with me while I read off of my notes here. As always, thank you guys for all the support. This has been a life-changing year for me, as most of you know. I appreciate everything that you guys have done and continue to do for me and for my family, as well as for each other. And I look forward to what 2020 has to bring. So happy holidays again, everybody. But on to the podcast. So for today's podcast, the people that were involved were Nikita, Klean, Shroud, FairTX, JennaJulien, and Pestily. In addition, at the very tail end of the podcast, we got to see a nice montage of several of our favorite community content creators from around the world, giving their thanks to both BSG and their well wishes for everyone for the new year. To start off, Nikita said that he wished everyone a Merry Christmas. However, he said that Christmas for people in Russia predominantly is just another normal work day. However, he did mention around the new year they would be taking some time off, much like they have done in previous years. First off, they started with abuse of game mechanics and this new patch. So for those of you that haven't seen it, please go check out the patch notes, which have been posted in just about every form of social media that people tend to congregate toward. The most notable of which is now anyone that dies via their own means or the means of a friend inside of a raid, or if they die without a firearm equipped, that person, instead of having 30% remaining in their health pool, will now be resorted back down to 1% instead. In addition to that, they also said that the gamma container will no longer be tradable. It cannot be put inside of other containers. It cannot be dropped inside of a raid. It cannot be unequipped inside of a raid instance. That, in addition to some other things having to do with thermal optics, but it seems that that's bugged at the moment. And finally, a bug that they did mention as well with the flea market, saying that the flea market was inaccessible or unsortable, depending on which person had which problem, but they were working on a hotfix for that as well. They also changed the amount of money that people can hold now to 200,000 rubles, as well as, he said, 2,000 USD and 2,000 euros, but right now it appears that it's only 1,000. I'm guessing that it's going to be updated here in the very near future. He did say that this hatchling problem, quote-unquote, fix is not really a fix, more of a Band-Aid. The idea is to just try and slow them down. Obviously, this change to the money is to deter people from doing any kind of real-world money selling, as well as the idea of the secure container. There was also a change to cheesing of skills that said that it will have some kind of diminishing returns. It appears that these diminishing returns are actually rather severe. The people in my community that were testing it out during this podcast duration actually said that within moments they started noticing a slowdown. So it seems like that diminishing return curve is rather steep. Shroud also made a suggestion saying that it would be a good idea to increase the natural flow or experience gain for people playing as opposed to cheesing those skill gains. And Nikita said skill boosting would still be possible with in-game items perhaps in the future that have usages, like books from Fallout, for example. There was also an idea to say that using task rewards to level these skills would be a better incentive to do so, like moving through tasks and having rewards for those tasks be skill experience as opposed to just grinding away on it slowly. Also, maybe even perhaps giving people a choice on which type of experience they would like to receive as that benefit as their task reward to kind of tailor the way that they want to build their character instead. Nikita also went on to say that he didn't like that Tarkov was a war with patterns. He doesn't like that Tarkov is repetitive with its raid interactions and is looking at more ideas toward randomizing how that works. He also paraphrased, which is something that I commend him for finally having come out and actually said something about this. There's been an awful lot of animosity toward people in the streaming space, specifically if you're a larger streamer, of which I know that I'm not one. But for those people that do have that kind of a community, so to speak, there's always been this stigma to say that these people throughout streaming are doing some kind of undue influence or don't really have a finger on the pulse of what the casual player really wants to see in the game. And Nikita actually said that, in a manner of speaking, that casuals matter. And most of the player base is slow. not like Pestily, who does this inside of a week. He said Tarkov isn't built with the idea of hardcore players only being in mind, and that the casual player needs some type of credence as well. In fact, now that there is this decrease of soft skill XP generation, Nikita, as well as talking with some of the streamers, specifically Shroud, ended up modifying the Shooter Born in Heaven task progression line so that instead of requiring sniper skills 5, 10, and 12, it now only requires 4, 9, and 10. In addition, he said that the Shooter Born in Heaven task will have that task moved from the part of it that is required to be in interchange to instead moving it over to reserve. Thanks to Veritas for coming up with that one, and thank you to Nikita for listening. But now only requires 4, 9, and 10. I don't know if this is going to be enough of a, nerf to the amount of experience that's required. The concern being that people that are trying to push ahead for this sniper skill leveling are going to end up having serious issues with generating this XP, but time will tell. In addition to this, there was talk about a new holiday gift being added. This time, that holiday gift is actually being split between people that own EOD and people that do not. For the people that have the standard, Left Behind, and Prepare for Escape editions, or non-EOD owners, those people are going to get an SVDS sniper rifle with a PSO, 5 magazines of SNB rounds, a money case, a meds case, and a shrimp pistol with 4 mags of SP10. For those that own EOD, instead, they are getting a P90 with a suppressor and a reflex sight, 4 magazines of SS190 ammo, an FN57 pistol with 4 mags of SS190, an items case, a money case, and a meds case. So for the first time, we're seeing people actually have a differentiation between how much stuff they're getting for their holiday loot. And in addition to this, it's also the first time since they've implemented the idea of a holiday gift that we're not seeing a key bar as part of that, which means that come the end of, the first quarter or so of the new year, when they actually do a wipe as planned or implemented, no longer will any account end up having a key bar on the onset. So that could end up changing things pretty significantly as well. Now moving on to current patch problems. There was talk of offline raids in customs and reserve being currently broken, as well as sorting of items on the flea market being currently broken, and they're working on a hotfix for that. Next was talk of a new content update that is coming before the end of this calendar year, somewhere around either on or before New Year's Eve. So somewhere in the next week, we should have some new content. Nikita said that the new patch that is coming is 90+% of new content additions, including new weapons and gear, new tasks, and the addition of being able to obtain part or all, we're not really sure, of Killa's tracksuit, which Nikita coined as being tactically Gopnik. In addition, there's also some reworking of sounds and animations of some weapons, but Nikita did not allude to any specifics. However, in the Russian podcast, he did mention that there was an issue with certain sounds for the ADAR, so I'm guessing that there is some level of change going on there. There was also some additional things that Nikita said are going to be coming, but as we all know, Nikita loves surprises, and he said he didn't want to tell us any more. The talk then moved to something more future-facing, what was coming in the new year and beyond. So in the new year, what it looks like we have coming up are things like storyline tasks and quests being added. So things like, where did the Terra group come from? Who and where are the origin stories of the existence of Scavs as a faction, or the cult, etc. All of the background lore pieces are going to be filled in. Additionally, there's going to be the adding of dailies, so tasks to keep the grindy folks among us, satiated for the time being. They're also looking at improving on the hideout, kind of like phase 2 in the development of the hideout coming up, in the new year, with a refueling and refilling center specifically for meds, like we saw with that injector animation. He said that the med bottles on that injector were going to be swappable. He also said that they would be adding a gym to level physical skills out of raid, which we like the idea of, obviously. Addition of purely craftable items, like having shell casings be used to create ammunition. But there's also going to be some soft skills that are going to be added for this grind, like crafting as a skill. The more skilled you are at crafting, perhaps the better yield of ammunition that you will generate from working on, making ammo. In addition to that, he also said there was going to be a soft skill for hideout management, which I guess would have something to do with consumption of resources, perhaps maybe even a perk that says you have some low percentage chance of not consuming a certain resource when you make an item. That would be very, very cool. Additionally, he said that the hideout will get a level 4 level of upgrades. We already talked about in a previous podcast that GPUs were having durability added to them, and there's going to be some other surprises, again, that Nikita did not want to talk about. Nikita said that he wants their players to be happy and enjoy their interaction with the game, which is why they're now looking at adding in some additional surprises for the year-end and the new year, which he did not make mention of. Things like beards showing up in the game for part of the Christmas event and Santa hats and things like that they've been doing over time. But it sounds like he's alluding to things that are going to be even more surprising, maybe things we haven't seen yet. Who knows? Additionally, the Streets of Tarkov patch will be coming at some point in the next calendar year, where they're saying that it's going to not only introduce new storyline tasks, but will also be a city downtown proper. Now, in addition to this, Nikita also did say something to the effect of it would take about a year before it was going to be right, possibly longer. So it could actually be more, I guess, than just a year from now. He said that this will be a representative Russian modern city or urban environment full of scavs existing differently with different AI behavior and having organized groups and or gangs. And in addition to this, they're going to be able to potentially loot dead bodies and or possibly even have peaceful behavior, like just sitting around eating, drinking, smoking, chatting, etc. Not necessarily as aggressive on the onset as what we're used to with these guys randomly roaming around these other maps. Prior to Streets coming out is going to be Lighthouse instead. So I guess the nearest map that we can expect to see is actually going to be Lighthouse and not Streets or Town, like I guess we were led to believe via translation. But this will be similar to Shoreline in scope, which makes sense that it would be next because they already kind of have all of these assets already. He also made mention that it's going to be accessed by the reserve train. So you'd have to work your way through the reserve map, 40 minutes, wait for the train to pick you up, take the train from the reserve to Lighthouse, and then do the Lighthouse raid, which, from what it seems to be, depending on how you then have to exit, maybe you have to take the train back, I don't know. It looks like this round trip could be easily more than an hour to an hour and 15 minutes. I'm not sure how many people would really have the ability to be able to run a raid of that duration, but if they maybe can speed up the train schedule or something to show up every 15 to 20 minutes, maybe that would work out a little bit better. They said that Lighthouse thematically will be a primary USEC hub and will include a new sniper boss. All locations will also have new extractions added, which is a good thing. In addition to that, he said that they're going to be doing nearly a complete overhaul of the factory location, updating the graphics and the lighting to kind of coincide with some of the newer maps and how they behave, as well as looking at just doing a brand new layout. I guess the way that factory has been run, while great, I'm sure that they've had some additional learning. And Nikita also did talk about how they wanted to expand possibly the size of the map as well and add some new rooms and new interactive locations. In addition to all of this was also the announcement of a Twitch Drops campaign, which is going to take place from December 30th to January 5th. The idea being that if you watch any live stream on Twitch of Escape from Tarkov, whatever your favorite streamers are, you have a very good chance to be getting some nice New Year's gifts in-game. So the screenshot that was shown looked like there was a golden TT, some Bitcoin, and some really, really nice additional items like a T7, for instance, that could end up dropping into people's inboxes. So I'm going to be streaming. And especially this coming weekend, I'm going to be streaming a considerable amount. So I would ask that you guys all come and check it out. Did you guys know that I stream on Twitch? I know, weird. I know. Then moved on to talking about some additional goals for 2020. Nikita said that the idea was they wanted to complete the main game cycle. That doesn't mean that it's going to be retail ready. What that means is that they wanted the game cycle, like starting your storyline progression and then moving through the storyline to the point where now you're kind of like in the end game grind. That main game cycle will be done, including those storyline tasks. All the main maps in the game that will not be DLC included, like, for instance, Streets of Tarkov, perhaps, will be completed. They will still obviously be in beta because it is not going to be retail ready as of that point. In addition to completing or looking at completing this main game cycle, they're also looking at adding a newbie map called Terminal. The idea being that it's going to be primarily single player or PvE in experience and scope, but it's going to start off in a bombed out Terra Group location that teaches you the base game mechanics. So this obviously is something that is much needed in the game. There is really no tutorial to speak of. It's kind of just trial by fire, watching guides on YouTube and learning from other content creators and text-based guides that are out there. In addition to this, coming out in the future, they're looking at a Scav Life DLC, meaning that you have the ability to play as, level up, and do the story of a Scav, like a day in the life of. He also said that you would have the ability to zone in and play as a Scav boss, which I thought was really cool. He also said, and this is a big one, there's going to be the addition of a public API for creation of independent support applications, including a companion app, like we've already seen from Veritas. Now, I think that the way that this is going is that Nikita is going to have Veritas continue to work on his Battle Buddy companion app. It seems like Nikita is kind of endorsing that. I don't imagine that it would be something that would become quote-unquote official, but it seems as though that's kind of like the go-to. And I know that with the roadmap that Veritas has for his Battle Buddy app, including that of like the profitability estimator that I made that uses the algorithm for flea market fees and being able to estimate what your profitability is going to look like in the future is something that Veritas is looking at importing into his application. That, along with the ability to even access the flea market and actually touch and feel and make transactions on the flea from a mobile device, is pretty huge. So it looks like the goal for 2020 is that this is going to be the last year of the wipe. So in 2020, the wipe's days are numbered, so to speak. It seems as though what they're looking at doing is transferring to a seasonal system, kind of similar to Path of Exile or Diablo, for instance, where you have the ability to start off with a brand new economy. Everyone starts over at square one if you so choose. And then at the end of the season, whatever progression you've got would then transfer items, money, whatever, perhaps select few items or all of the inventory, who knows, to your quote-unquote permanent character. There's no idea on when exactly they're looking to implement something like this, but this sounds like a retail launch type of scenario. Now, I personally would like to see seasons last no longer than 3 months, ideally something like 60 days, but again, that is completely up to the player base and how fast Nikita allows the player progression to go. For 2020 and beyond, now, Nikita looks at things like the following. In addition of an arena mode, I would personally like to see the ability to bet on these types of events. Even if it's third-party betting would be really cool. If you see, a high-level interaction of players going against each other in that arena, well-known teams of 2s and 3s kind of going at each other in a head-to-head environment, to be able to bet items on that with in-game currency or gear would be very, very cool. In addition, I also think that this should be like a ticketed system. Someone should have to pay for the ability to enter something like this, kind of like Hearthstone's arena. In addition to this, he also said that they would be looking at adding some facial customization, but they also said that facial customization will be extremely limited. They're not going to allow people to just kind of go crazy on the memes and make somebody that looks like they don't fit. He also talked about a weapon overheating system. They wanted to add that a lot. They also talked about modifiable hand grip distances on the handguard of certain rail systems. Tactical reloading if you have similar mags. advanced recoil characteristics, and what he meant by that was the differentiation of recoil modifiers. Right now, recoil has vertical and horizontal, but if you have any attachment, like a foregrip, like the RK2, for instance, we'll say that it decreases recoil by a set percentage. That percentage is across the board. Vertical and horizontal is both decreased by this percentage amount. However, what they are looking at doing is wanting to differentiate between horizontal recoil, vertical recoil, and a vectorized recoil that would affect the accuracy and clustering of a weapon when it's under a full auto type scenario. I like this idea. This gets into the nuances that all of the smooth brains really want to see so that they can IQ and theory craft the heck out of a game like this one. He also stated that they're going to be looking at doing variable stances for like CQB readiness positions where you would, instead of having the gun shouldered, you would instead have the stock of the gun resting above the shoulder so that you can kind of bring that barrel in closer to your chin. He also talked about having weight restrictions and weight penalty. So things like modifying characters' movement if they're overweight, an inability to move as fast, obviously, but also the effects of inertia and adding physics like that into the game, where it takes a minute for you to get momentum, and then once you have that momentum to try and slow down and stop is not as easy. It's just going to keep kind of carrying you forward. He also said that the idea of being able to switch shoulders on your weapons so that you can kind of switch hands back and forth so that you can, look around corners tactically instead of only having the firearm on your right shoulder would be something that they would like to add in the future, but that requires a lot more additions of animations. There was also the question of being able to play offline with friends, and said that that's something that they wanted to do as well. He also said in the near future they're going to be looking at adding additional meds. Bleeding, for instance, is something that is not just fixed by putting a bandage around it. That doesn't actually stop you from bleeding. So what they're looking at adding are things like tourniquets, which is, they're looking at just simple rubber tube tourniquets, as well as adding coagulants, which we already talked about earlier. Nurse Nikita explaining first aid. So for those of you that haven't really been paying attention or never used it, Reshade obviously is now banned. It is not usable in any way, shape, or form inside of Tarkov. Now, for people that use NVIDIA, if you hit Alt F3, you have the ability to go into the NVIDIA Freestyle settings and still have, at some level, the ability to modify certain filters in the game that way. That currently is not blocked, but it most likely will be in the future. For the time being, if people don't use an NVIDIA card and they use AMD instead, there is no way for people to modify anything in the game other than sharpness, which recently was increased to being allowed to, sharpen it up to 3.0 in increments as opposed to just 1.5 or 2.0, whatever it was before. In this case, what that means is people that have visual impairments like color blindness have no real ability, unless they have an NVIDIA graphics card, to modify the coloration of the game. Nikita understands this and said that once the in-game filters and colorization options that they're going to allow are added to the core game, all other filtering applications will be completely blocked. He also suggested that people that have visual impairments or other forms of disabilities or impairments of playing the game, that they write into BSG with any suggestions that they have, and they will get to work on trying to accommodate those people that need it. So that was really, really great. The talk of VoIP came up, which is something that's supposed to be getting added very, very soon. They asked if, the content creators asked if people would be able to mute others and or report them if they're doing things in-game that they shouldn't be, trying to cause problems. He said, Nikita first said, well, you need to kill the guy. And he said, yes, there would be the ability at some level to report them. Additional measures that they're taking are things like scavs possibly converging on people that use VoIP a little bit too much, which makes sense. If you're speaking out loud and you're within earshot of a scav, they should react accordingly. Additionally, he also said that if you're able to see them via line of sight and they're talking on VoIP like crazy, there should be some type of visual indicator that gives you the player's name, so then you could report them if you needed to. He said that for team play, headsets and radios will have protected or encrypted channels. The team would set the channel on the radio pre-raid, and then when they're inside, they'll be able to kind of just talk amongst themselves and won't necessarily have that hijacked. He did say that there would be the potential ability using some other mechanics to hijack those radio broadcasts from enemy teams. What I would love to see as like, potential one-off would be if you're against another team of players and you get one of them and have the ability to like loot their headset. I think that you should be able to hear what those people are saying inside of the raid. Like that to me would be so ridiculously cool. There was a question of Raid 3 and when the estimation of time was on that. Nikita said that they were hoping for a release by the end of this month, but it's in the final stages of editing, and he's not really sure if it's going to make the new year or not. There was a question about adding seasonal weather. DLC packages were going to be the way that happens, but those DLCs will be free, and the seasons will change globally in the game for everyone. He said that the official Tarkov merch store will possibly be added by mid-January or so, which would be really cool. Shoreline is going to be getting a scav boss. This scav boss is named Sanator, which I guess is also Doctor. And apparently they are abusing their own supply of stims and meds. Nikita said they're constantly on meds and other drugs. They spawn in either the village or the first floor of the resort on the medical floors. Cultists will have their own bosses and are going to be located anywhere that you're going to find a cult circle or cult location on all of the different maps. They're going to be made up of acolytes, bishops, high-ranking members of church hierarchy or clerical hierarchy, if you will. They only appear at night. They're going to have a totally different AI behavior from what it is that we're used to seeing. And I'm guessing that means like sneaky melee takedowns because Nikita said that they're going to be heavily melee reliant. Nikita said that they will be very scary. And one of the things that he did mention, which was shown previously, was this like serrated and bent out knife that had blades on either end. He said that blade will be dipped in poison, which will not allow someone to be able to heal that away without a craftable specific antidote that is made in the hideout, but it seems like, from what he said, it's going to be pretty expensive. There was a question of whether or not we were going to get a grenade box. He said, yes, it will be added. Vaulting over structures, fences, windows, those kinds of things. Nikita actually said that there's a vaulting animation in the works that he wanted to show as a leak, but the animation wasn't quite ready. There actually were no leaks for this. There was a question on whether or not there was going to be a scav boss in the labs. Nikita said that there was not a plan to add a lab scav boss because of the nature of the map anyway. It's kind of like this hidden location, and there's already raiders. He did have an idea to add kind of like this elite Terra Group security team of specialists, but that was never really implemented, and it doesn't look like that's planned to be. There was also a question of a scav boss being somewhat more mobile and more dynamic, like patrolling an entire map, for instance. And Nikita said that's not hard to implement from a coding perspective, but it doesn't really fit into the lore of the game. And apparently the scav bosses themselves are located in these specific locations because of their role. So it will be interesting to see how that lore progresses for each of them. Now, lastly, Tarkov is going to go into its holiday sale period, which will be December 27th to January 5th, coinciding almost exactly with this Twitch Drops campaign. That's going to give people a 25% discount if you want to purchase the game, as well as any of the purchases that occur between that date range will also be eligible to get the holiday gift, which lasts through every single wipe cycle. So I would highly recommend waiting until that discount occurs and do that. So that's pretty much it. Nikita said that there's going to be another podcast in about 6 weeks, and it sounds like there's a second one in the future that's also being planned for maybe somewhere around the 3-month mark. But that was the entire podcast. Hopefully you guys found it to be educational. I thank you so much for all of the love and support. Please give a subscription if you figure this is worth it, and I will see you all in the next one. Happy holidays.